And there's no doubt about it that the North Wall of the Eiger, it is, yes, it is an iconic climb. And it deserves to be as well. It's not just, if you like, the reputation and the story. It is an extraordinary mountaineering challenge. It's got every kind of climbing on it. And the whole situation, there's no mountain face like it, I think anywhere in the world quite. And it's what makes it such a very, very special climb. It's a huge, complex face. You know, there are other faces that are technically harder, but there's no face that is so complex and with so many different challenges upon it. And then if you overlay that with the story and the number of people who died and the tragedies and everything else, and it just invests that face with this extraordinary aura that I think is unique in the world. You're very aware of that history of death, if you like, which, as a serious climber, I mean, you've come to live with. Climbing is a dangerous game, and climbing at extremes, and the Eiger is extreme. You're facing that kind of situation, but it still is. It's more alarming than most mountains. I was very, very aware of the history of the Eiger when we sat below it. I actually went seriously to climb it in the summer of 1961 with Don Willans. And we spent the whole summer sitting below the Eiger, but it wasn't in condition. But we went up on 2 occasions. And each time I went up, and even before I finally climbed it in 1962, I didn't sleep much the night before. And you just couldn't help thinking of the stories, the story of Tony Kurtz as he kind of very nearly managed to abseil down to get to safety and ran out of rope and died just hanging on the rope, and all the others who'd lost their lives. But the moment I got onto the face, all that vanished, and then you're completely immersed actually in the climb itself. Climbing gives me the biggest buzz, the biggest satisfaction of pretty well any activity that I've ever come across. I love the whole process of climbing and all its aspects. And I suppose it starts with actually, you know, the actual physical process of climbing, of using your arms and your legs and your muscles and your coordination like a gymnast to actually get up a stretch of rock. So, and that in itself is immensely satisfying. But of course, then with climbing as well, there's that element of risk. And the element of risk, the attraction of risk, is an inherent part of climbing. I think it's very, very addictive as well. And so it's a matter of going into a dangerous situation and using your skill and your ability to actually overcome that risk and danger. And when you've done a series of very hard moves, or when you've got out of a really desperate situation on something like the North Wall of the Eiger, there is an extraordinary exhilaration, euphoria almost, in that process. The original North Wall of the Eiger route is quite a serpentine route, trying to find the easiest possible way up the face, and it kind of works its way up the face. And climbers have always been fascinated by diretissimos, going as straight up the face as you possibly can. And it was a long time before anyone even started thinking of an alternative route on the North Wall of the Eiger, and it really came in 1965, 1966. And in the winter of 1966, 2 teams went for the Eiger Direct. A very small, compact, kind of Anglo-American team, which consisted of John Harlan, a charismatic American climber who took the Alps by storm, with Leighton Core, who was one of the most brilliant rock climbers in America at the time, and Dougal Haston, the Scot, who was an iconic figure himself in British mountaineering, and he was just emerging into the limelight when Harlan invited him to join that team. And a German team of 8 also were going for it at the same time. And I actually became involved as well. I had been in the original team with John Harlan, and I just had doubts about the way John was planning it, and I'd never climbed in the winter before. I was interested in the summer ascent. And so I dropped out, but I then came back in as the Daily Telegraph correspondent and photographer, and ended up by climbing halfway up the face. So these two teams arrived. We were there first, and we were hoping to climb it proper alpine style, which means you pack your rucksack at the bottom and keep going till you get to the top, as one normally does in the Alps. And then the German team arrived. The weather was very bad, so we hadn't even managed to make a start, and the Germans were fixed roping it. And so we started fixed roping it as well. So it developed into a kind of the slowest race in the world as we slowly worked our way up. And eventually, for one reason and another, the teams joined up. And they'd very nearly got to the White Spider. And the ropes we were using were ridiculous. They were much, much too thin. And I think it was an accident waiting to happen. And tragically, it happened when John Harlan was jumaring, which is the way you climb these ropes, up into the White Spider for the final push to the summit. And the rope parted, and he fell to his death, 5,000 feet. He was the last one up. And so there were 4 Germans and Dougal Haston up there. The weather then broke. They sat out a storm in the White Spider for about 3 days and then fought their way out in the storm. There was a lot of debate then whether they should go on or come down. And they took the right decision. They said, well, no, we'll finish the climb as much as anything as a kind of memorial to John, because John was so focused in actually doing it. And I was focused on my role of getting the photographs. So I skied across to actually find the body of John Harlan. And I'll never forget it. And he was just spread-eagled in the snow. And amazingly, wasn't that smashed up. And it was, I remember thinking it was the most kind of symbolic, powerful photograph you could ever take. And it's one that I wouldn't. But it's something that has, yeah, it still hits you. I mean, I've lost so many friends. I mean, on several of my expeditions. And so that one almost accepts it. And it doesn't change one's sadness at losing friends. But I think you've got to be quite matter-of-fact about it if you're going to go on climbing. You don't become callous, but I think you actually become accepting. It's part of this activity that you do. I mean, I've accepted the losses. I've been immensely saddened by those losses, but I've never remotely thought of giving up climbing. I've got a kind of blind optimism. I don't think it'll ever happen to me, even though I know it could have done so easily. I mean, there's no logic in it.